Welcome back, everybody. We're taking another look at Raphael through a commission, a prestigious commission that he was awarded down in Rome at Vatican City for the Pope's papal offices. It's a almost movie screen sized fresco mural, and it underscores this idea of artists starting to leave their home cities and regions and are starting to get recruited into other districts, eventually into other countries. But for the time being, we see in the Italian High Renaissance, artists like Raphael and later Michelangelo head south and find lucrative work in this blossoming rebirth of a city of Rome. Of course, that had its glory days back during the Roman Empire. Let's take a look at this mural I'm talking about. All right, the title of it is called Philosophy. The nickname is School of Athens, and I'll explain that in just a minute. And let me take my image away here so you can see those dates. It's located at the Vatican Palace, and specifically located in the Papal Library, or the Pope's thinking place, if you will, where he has his, inspiring books and probably spends time in thought and in rumination on papal affairs, running the Vatican, running, the seat of the Christian church at that point in the 16th century there. The medium is fresco, thank goodness, right? We already know what happened when Leonardo da Vinci chose something else for his famous Last Supper painting. The dimensions, as I mentioned, quite large, 19 feet in height by 27 feet across, so 19 by 27 feet, pretty large. Now, what's interesting about this is Raphael, as we know, was working out of Florence. He gets recruited to Rome, and he stays there for many years and executes many commissions on behalf of the Vatican, and specifically many popes as well. But what you see here is one of 4 murals you can find in this room, in this papal library. I'll see if I can attach a little camera pan I found on the internet that kind of shows you what it's like in that space as a tourist. They're pretty magnificent in person. What I'm showing you here, though, is the one we're going to focus on, but all 4 of them have a relationship to each other because they are supposed to represent the 4 branches of human knowledge that a pope should know to be an effective head of the church. One of them is law. Law, that makes sense. You need to understand how to make judgments, how to, govern, that kind of thing. The other one is theology, not surprising, right? Understanding of religion. If you go to seminary school, you're going to study a lot of theology. The other one is surprising, poetry. Poetry, by the way, was all the rage in both the Renaissance and Baroque periods. We'll meet an artist later in this semester who was thrown in jail for a slanderous poem. I know, that doesn't happen nowadays. Just look what's on Twitter. Anyway, that'll come later. And then finally, philosophy. Now, what's interesting about this and why it's nicknamed the School of Athens is because it's not about philosophy in the 16th century during Raphael's time. It's about philosophy from antiquity, specifically from the great age of classical Greece, where they worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses. Christianity wasn't even on the map then, guys. That's what's so interesting about this mural, is that the popes themselves were humanists, that they were pursuing knowledge and found inspiration in the great philosophical minds of ancient Greece. So there wasn't this prejudice or this closure of thinking that this was a backwards world where they worshipped all these gods and goddesses like Zeus and Athena. No, there was acceptance. There was seems to be this kind of respect for understanding that a lot of the foundations for human civilization, especially in the Western world, came from that early period. What's also interesting is you even see statues in this painting of Apollo, the god of music and light, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, included, sort of representing the arts and great minds, that kind of thing, embodied in those two illusions of painted statues, okay, that you see here. All right, what you also find in a lunette or semicircular format is what Raphael has endeavored to use both atmospheric and linear perspective to construct a really elaborate kind of stage for a crowded picture, right? It's almost like a class reunion, if you will, of the great minds from ancient Greece. It's not like they all existed at the same time or all, gathering at conventions in Athens every year or something like that. It's just more of like a who's list, if you will, of the great minds from antiquity. Now, not surprising, in a Renaissance and high Renaissance composition is to find the most important people in the middle. And it's there you find kind of an older gentleman on the left, and then a younger man who was actually a student to kind of the iconic philosophers of their age. So on the left is Plato, on the right is Aristotle. I don't know if you can read that. Plato is, that without getting into too much philosophy, because we're not a philosophy class, was concerned with sort of, thinking along the lines of the universe, the cosmos, more transcendental kind of philosophical concerns. And that's why he's sort of gesturing in this way upward, whereas Aristotle has his hand out flat, gesturing kind of more to his arena of philosophical thought, allied with kind of earthbound human concerns. So the idea is Raphael organized all of the thinkers aligned with Plato on our left, next to Plato himself, and then Aristotle's kind of people are on the right-hand side. And organized, of course, in a convincing illusionistic extension with lots of depth, thanks to linear perspective. You can see Raphael constructing that from the tile floors and the coffers in these almost looking like, arches of triumphal arches, right, that are presented in a series for the illusion of depth and distance through linear perspective. Atmospheric perspective, definitely, you're right, in the back as well. The last arch also underscores, of course, the central importance of these two great minds, and of course the whole ripple effect of their philosophical thinking throughout the ages. So all in all, with these techniques of perspective, which are very contemporary, right, and all the naturalism and the description of the human body, you have something that's an homage to the minds of the classical world, not only with the people who are there, but also the architectural elements too. We have, pilasters from antiquity. We have those cornices. We have those coffers, those Roman arches. All of that is so very humanist and so typical of high Renaissance art at this point in history. Here's some of all the names of the minds of the past, like Socrates and Epicurus and Diogenes, all of this, Pythagoras, like all these, for those of you who are taking sort of the buffet line of GE classes in college, you might likely encounter some of these names as sort of the foundational thinkers for many, many lines of thinking for humanity. There's a little detail shot for you of Plato and Aristotle and the gestures I was referring to, and again, in those, togas and robes that are sort of generic classical world costuming of the day. All right, next up, the great Michelangelo. There's a sneak peek at a sculpture that he accomplished when he was only 22 years old, you guys. Stay tuned for that coming up next as we look at the art of the Italian High Renaissance.